Let's start building our first SaaS. What should it be about? Some business owners would like to qualify their leads and know even more about their customers. And they want to do this by letting them answer a quiz. So, a lead qualifier by a quiz. A full SaaS for this will contain two workflows. One for taking a quiz, and this is used for the leads. The second workflow is setting up a questionnaire or quiz, and this is used for the business owners. I'm afraid only the second part can be charged for, so we'll leave that one into another time. So in this first video, we will build the Take a Quiz workflow. And if there is interest for it, let's build the second part of it, the signing a quiz as well. Welcome. Step 1 is to define a quiz in JSON. I will store my JSON in a file for now, but in the future the JSON will live in a MongoDB. This will make it possible to later read it into the application and present parts necessary for a quiz. So what parts are there to a quiz workflow? I see 4 parts. Now first, we let this JSON file contain a list of different quizzes with its own ID, and I will call this one Data, just for fun. I will only have one quiz in this one, just to get started. And the 4 parts we were talking about. The first one, the landing page, or welcome page, whatever you will call it. It needs to contain 2 parts. We want a welcoming message or a headline that sucks people in. And then we want a description that everything that we want to do here is take a quiz, it's free, it's fun, just do it. The second step, that is the lead data recovery. We want to get email and name from our leads so that we can contact them later. I will also use a lead ID, which will use UUID4, which is a randomized string. But there's not much in this database that needed for that. That's just a form that we need to set up. The third part is the actual quiz. And that quiz we have here. In this case, I have 3 questions defined only. And each question is a dictionary. The question has a name, question 1, question 2, question 3, and so on. The question has a type, and I only support 2 types in this case. I have a yes/no question, and I have a multi-answer question, or a series of checkboxes. I have text, which is the actual question. In this case, do you know FastHTML? The next one that has a lot of questions, 1 for each checkbox. And the last one, do you know content marketing? And then for each question, I also put the correct answer here, or at least the correct answer as I would like to see it. So I would like to know that my customers know FastHTML. And of course, you will check this one. And for the second question, we have, Do you know FastHTML, MongoDB, HTML, and HTMX? And since you're watching my videos, you know all of these. And for the third question, do you know content marketing? Well, you're kind of watching a film about it, at least building a SaaS for content marketing. So let's press yes. And then the fourth step, that is the result. That is a big one. When all questions is done, we collect and calculate the scores. A total score and a relative score. In this quiz, I have chosen to make 3 bins with a range from 80 to 100. That is the green bin, and that represents my perfect customer. Then we have an orange, which is kind of a good customer, but it could be a bit better. And then we have 0 to 30, which is you should maybe learn a bit more about these things I'm asking before you become a customer of mine. For these result bins, we have a range of min and max. We have what we call it, the green, orange, and red. We have a text that represents an analysis that we can say to anyone who's taken this quiz. Then I also included a call to action. And in this case, I mostly want them to click the link that is in this URL. And that is what I have for these 3 different bins. The green one, the orange one, which has more or less the same call to action, and then we have the red one, where I recommend them to go and watch some videos on FastHTML and learn a bit more before returning. And this will give the result and the score and the feedback of this quiz. So here we have it. This is the database that is containing the quiz. Now we want an extra thing to the last part, the result calculation. We also create a link that we actually emails to the email that was recorded to this lead. And this one gives a link to a presentation page where all this information is given in a nice format. And since we are using the email that we get in, this gives us an email verification to this lead, and we know that this email is a valid email. So that is actually the JSON storage of this quiz. I stored this in a .db.json file in my project directory. Later on, all this information will be in Mongo, but I've chosen to not use Mongo for this first demonstration. We can also add another quiz by just filling in this database with another name or identification of the quiz. So if you like some regular inspiration to your FastHTML SaaS builds, then subscribe to this channel and I will see you soon. And step 2 of building this SaaS workflow. That is to define a state machine that will guide the application through these 4 parts or 4 stages. It will look a bit like this. State changes are pressing, for the first one, pressing a button. For the second one, posted and approved data form with the email and name. And for the third state change, that is, answered all questions in the quiz. And when all that is done, the email is sent. The sequence of the questions are also a bit of a state machine, keeping count of what questions comes next. But that is just linear calculations. By now, we have identified a few pieces of information that we need to keep in storage. The session cookie is used for ID of the quiz, that was Drapne data, and we might do many in the future. For the second, it's the lead ID, that is this randomized string to identify a lead. Then we have the state, which is the state of the state machine. And I'm using the word quest for the question number to be answered next. Now, answers to questions, question scoring, email, name, and lead ID, total score and relative score. All that needs to be stored, and I store it in a second JSON file, which actually works as a database. That will go into a database later, but for now I use files just for convenience. So now we have an idea of what's needed to keep the application moving forward and traversing all the steps that's needed for a quiz workflow, and where all this data should be stored. Step 3 of making this SaaS build is actually writing the code, so that we soon can run it locally and test out our features. Looking at the code, we have some imports. We have FastHTML, of course, a JSON, UUID, which I use for lead ID, and then from data classes I use as dict, and we will see examples of this later. I used to set up a domain URL that's used in the serve called later on. I use this to be able to set an environment variable later on when we start this up on a server. But since I'm running locally, I'm using localhost as a default value. Quite nifty configuration here. And then I set the app name, and this will be used in the fast app call. Then I read in some environment variables from an .env file. I'm not using any of these now, but they could be good to know for later. And then we read in the db.json file containing the actual quiz, and I put this in the variable db. It is coded from JSON. And then we have some code for loading the lead database that is kept in this file locally on the directory. And each entry into this database is using this data class, LDB. We have email name, lead ID, which is random string. We have a list of scores, a total score, and a relative score. And those two are calculated in the end stage results. And then I have two functions working with this file, making it possible to create a new LDB entry into this database and reading out LDB from this database, reading out an entry which contains the lead ID. And this corresponds quite well with what we can do with Mongo. And I also have a final function that can take an LDB item and update the file with the new parts. This corresponds to an update to a database. And then we are down to the actual definition of the Fast app. As you see, I'm using the new trick of setting default page IDs to Drapner data in this case. And then we have the home page. The home page is not really used in this application, but I put one in and I just gave it a link to this quiz that we have defined in the JSON file. So this will be the link that actually will be used by those who wants to try out this quiz. And talking about that route, here we have the handler for it. It is quite a long one because we're handling the entire state workflow in this one function. So we'll see examples of that. We start off with getting access to the database of the quiz itself. We really need to know that. And we also verify that the string ID that we get in, the quiz ID, is something that is defined. That is what we have defined in the database. And if it is not available, we're giving an error message here. But if it is, we check if the session cookie has got a session ID identifier. And if it doesn't, we initiate the session cookie. We put session ID in the session equals to the quiz ID. In this case, Drapner data. Then we put the state variable to the first state of the state machine, which is welcome. We put the quest to the first question number, which is 0. And we create a new randomized user ID for this lead. And the lead identifier is used in the LDB database. And then we enter the actual welcome state of the state machine. And what do we do here? Yeah, we don't do much. We present a page which has some text on it, the welcome text that we talked about from the JSON file, and the description. And then we have a button. A button that leads to lead info, and that's about it. So if someone sees this page and clicks the button, they will go to lead info. Lead info is a get handler, so we can read the session cookie, and the first thing we do when we get here is we set the next state to lean info, which is lead information gathering. I have a print here that just shows where we are to the console. And then I set the route back to the root of the main state machine. And then we redirect the response back to that state machine. So when we get to this redirected address, we will jump into the session state lean info. And here we define a form. We place some text before it. Please provide email and name. And we also give the information that we will send you an email containing a link to the result of this quiz. That is a hint that we really would like to validate that this is a valid email. The button here is of type submit to sign up. So when that one is pressed, we come to this sign up. And this is a post request. So we get the session cookie, and we also get data from this form. And the form type we have here, it contains email and it contains the name. What we do here is just that we create a new LDB called the variable called LLDB, and we create a new LDB from the data class LDB, and we set the email, the name, and this lead ID. And then we create this new entry into our LDB database or the JSON file. So this is validated and okay. We then change state to the next one, which is the quiz itself, and redirect back to the state machine. And back again at the state machine, we go run into this quiz state. We start off by looking at if we have already done all questions that are defined in this quiz. And if we do, we will change the state to result and redirect back to ourselves. That is how we get out of this loop of questions. But this time we're starting off, so we will not trigger that one. We will just move into the quiz database. And here we set some texts. Now if we look at what the quiz state returns, that is a page with a container containing a card with containing an H1 with a text containing the name of the question. So it's question 1, question 2, question 3, or whatever you choose to call it. And then we have card with answer, which is more or less question, but this question depends on what type we have of question. If we have a yes/no question, and in that case, we just make a div containing the text of the question, and then a field set with button yes and no. The targets for yes and no buttons are yes and no. The multi-answer question made by checkboxes is a bit more tricky to get right. What I basically do is in this variable prel, I put together a string of the Python code which is needed to make this list of checkboxes with their respective questions. And when it's time to put this into a form, I do eval on this string. And the button that is used to say that you have answered the question correctly, that is a next button, which is a type submit as well, but it goes to the next handler. So that is how you answer the yes, no, and the multi-questionnaire. So let's look at these questionnaires. So the yes button handler, that one looks at the question itself. This is just digging into the actual question. And then, since we are getting answers to a question, we also need to read in the actual lead LDB data for this lead. And the lead itself has a list of scores. And here the current question scoring, we create a we create a dictionary with the name of this question and the score that this answer is given. And in a yes question, we get 1 if the correct answer is yes, otherwise we get 0. You could consider having -1 here as well, and then we append this score to the LLDB scores and update the database with this new answer. Now we have answered one question, so let's move on to the next quest. And then we redirect back to the state machine. The node handler is identical, except that we get a 1 score if the answer was no. That's the only difference between these two. And then we have the next handler, which is a handler for a multi-answer checkbox question. So we read the correct answers from the database, we read in the LDB data from prior answers, and then we create another current question score with the name of the question. In this situation, we actually append the entire. I made a function that actually corrects these scores out of the correct scoring from the DB database. And this one returns a list of scores, 1 for each checkbox. So we read this one, and we read the LDB with this lead ID that we're having. We create a current question score with the name of the action question, and the score is actually a list of scores for each checkbox. Then we append that to the LDB and send the LDB back to the database or file. Then we move on to the next question and redirect back to the state machine. So let's say that we have entered all questions and we're ready to move on. We will still be returned back to this state quiz. And as we said before, the first thing that we check is that if we are done with this quiz. And if we are, we set the state to results and we redirect back to ourselves. So moving on to the result stage. When we get to this stage, we will start calculating the total scores. We also read in all the previous results from the database, the LDB database. And for all the scores in LDB, we check what type it is. Is it an integer or is it a list? If it's an integer, we just add on these ones. But if there is a list of scores, like for a multi-question, we need to sum up these questions and add that sum to the total score. And then we have the total score and we can calculate the relative score, which then is 100 times the total score divided by 6, as there are 6 questions in this scoring. And then I update the LDB in the LDB item to the total score and relative score and store it all back to the database. And now we should send an email to this lead. Right now I don't do that, I just print out the lead ID so that I can check it later, because the score itself will be results followed by the lead ID. And then we present the final page for this result. And that is more or less thanking you for taking the score, and you should check your email to get the link. And that concludes the big state machine that we have been using. So we only have one handler left, and that is the results with the lead ID. We get the session cookie and the lead ID. We get access to the database, and this is how we then present the information. We get the information from the LDB database, and then we start printing some information here. If we look in what is actually presented, we start off with a headline saying here are your results. Then we have a div of tres, which is your total score, the TOT score, and the relative score, the rel score that we calculated in the step before. And then after that, this is the res thing. And that is the binning information that we got. So we need to go into the database and results and loop over the number of bins that we have just to see where in which bin did this lead handle arrive in. And when we know what, well, we are using this criteria range mean and criteria range max and compare that to the relative score. And when we know which one we have, we can print out what is the name of this category. Is it green, red, or orange? What will be the text that corresponds to that bin? And what is the call to action text that belongs to this bin? And for the fourth one, what is the URL that we want them to click next? That is put in the result, and the result is the last part of this container, and that is how we present the result to the lead. And as you see, we got a serve with the domain URL and port 5001. All this is 260 lines of code, which I think is quite good for this type of functionality. Some parts of it will be removed when we move to a database, but there will be some more stuff that will be entered when we start doing email handling as well. So I guess we will end up around 250, 260 codes of Python. So step 4 of this building a SaaS is just to run it locally. And that is basically to test it out and see if it's good enough to be shipped to the interwebs. And here I have it running with the home page, which doesn't really make sense. So let's jump to the actual quiz. And here we have the welcome page, or the landing page, if you will. Are you ready for a SaaS transformation? So we are now in the welcome stage of the state machine, as you recall. Let's start the quiz. And the first one is entering an email and a name. And as we write here, you will get the results in the email, so you can cheat. In this case, I will do a fake one, and a fake name, since we're just testing here locally. And when we press that one, we will jump right in to question 1. And actually, now I see a bug. Why is this text still here? It should be removed. We'll fix that one later. Okay, question 1. Do you know FastHTML? Yes. Question 2. Do you know FastHTML again? I had a hard time coming up with questions for this one. I do FastHTML, MongoDB, HTML, and HTMX. So full score for me, I hope. We do next. And the last question, do I know content marketing? No, I don't really know that, but let's say yes, just for the fun of it. Okay, thank you for taking the quiz. An email will be sent to so that you can get the link and check your email. You may now close this window. The thing is that the old cookie, the session cookie, is still alive in the browser. So if you want to run this one again, you need to reset cookies. Okay, if we want to check the results here, we should go to another results, and then we should look here in the here we have the string of the lead idea, and we're copying that one and pasting it into the link here. And let's see if we get some results. Here are your results. Score 6, relative score 100. Category green. You're welcome to try out our starter kit. Yay! And then a link, which now doesn't go anywhere, but it could be to a sales page. Okay, apart from the quiz, it looks quite right. I will just see that it will replace everything that should be gone by then. So where is the value in this workflow for me as a seller? And that is the email list, the contacts to leads in the LDB database. That's the value for the user or the businessman. Now, where is the value for the lead? He gets a bit more information about what is needed to get this transformation that they're maybe looking for. In this case, they might want to have a starter kit for a SaaS based on FastHTML. As I see it, there is value for both me selling and for the lead getting a bit more information. Evaluating these 4 steps. What is missing in this application apart from the stuff that didn't clear out? For the first thing, I would really like to improve the welcome page or the landing page with some nice images. I haven't really found a way to do that using Pico's CSS, so if you have a good way of doing that, do let me know. On the second, it's running locally on my laptop right now. To be shipped externally, we're going to need 3 things. For the first, we need a hosting. And right now, I think I will be going for render.com. For the second, we need a database instead of this JSON files. And right now, I would go with MongoDB Atlas. And for the third thing, we will need an email to be able to send email to all leads. And right now I have a couple that I can look into, and that's Mailgun, Mailtrap, SMTP2Go, Turbo SMTP, Sendinblue. I don't really know which one of them will be best for this one, but one of them will, I guess. My quiz is only having 3 questions at the moment. It should be somewhere around 15 and some specific ones. So before I put this out, I should really make a full quiz out of it. So all in all, to get this running on the interweb, it's not that much work. Some, but not too much. Would you like to take part of my full quiz? Do comment below and I might even push this out to the internet. Then we also have the second workflow, the design a quiz or make your own quiz. Would you like to see a part 2 of this? Let me know. Now, I didn't come up with this quiz thing myself. I'm heavy influenced by Daniel Priestley. Search YouTube for his name or maybe for key person of influence that is running a YouTube channel. He talks a lot about this with lead qualifications. Also, there is already a running SaaS doing this right now, and that is the Score app. They have a YouTube channel named Score app for more information. See a link to all this in the description. By now, I might be an affiliate to them, so use my link if you want to set up your score directly right now on a SaaS app that is far ahead and quite more nice, I would like to say. So check them out as well if you like to try out this lead qualification by a quiz. I do hope this SaaS building video was inspiring. I'll be back soon with more of this sort. Maybe also a part 2 of this application. Be subscribed to not miss any of this SaaS action that's coming up, and I'll be back soon with some more FastHTML-ish stuff. Until then, keep on coding.